Have you ever thought about the reason why products seem to be lasting for less time? Not so long ago, a pair of jeans used to last for years. But nowadays, after some laundering, it already seems like it's time to buy another pair, right? What about your mother's refrigerator? It was almost a family member. Yours, however? Well, this is not just an impression. The product's lifetime, the period that goes from purchase to disposal, is actually decreasing. 1. Mechanical breakdown. 2. Software glitches and electrical failure. 3. Along with unavailable or high repair costs, are the main causes of product replacements. With twice as many people expected to enter the global middle class in the coming years, it's essential to increase the lifetime of products to avoid unnecessary waste generation and depletion of natural resources. So how can we deal with this problem? As consumers, we can take better care of products so they can be used for a longer time. Regularly perform maintenance, repair, or upgrade a product before buying a new one. Whenever possible, look for products that have been refurbished, remanufactured, or repaired that meet our needs instead of buying new. But industry can also help by having strategies such as designing products that last longer, creating products that make maintenance and upgrading easier, encouraging a repair culture as opposed to the take, make, dispose mindset, designing products that enable repair or remanufacturing, keeping them useful or even better than before, encouraging the reuse of products for different functions, delaying their disposal. These practices reduce raw material extraction and waste generation, stimulate energy efficiency, empower and educate consumers, and can engage all actors of the value chain in positive change. The Longview Report was developed under the One Planet Network Consumer Information Program. The program aims to improve accessibility and credibility of information to consumers. Product lifetime is a topic which consumers need more information about, and the Consumer Information Program will continue to work on it. Please contact us today to hear more.
Thank you, Camila, for showing the video. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you today. Greetings from Brazil. This is the last day of the Consumer Information Conference. My name is Bruna Tiusso. I'm from Macatu Institute. We are an NGO based in Brazil, which works to mobilize society towards sustainability and conscious consumption. Acatu is a partner of UNEP in different projects. We co-lead the working group of Product Lifetime Extension, a group from the Consumer Information Program, which is part of the One Planet Network. And that's the reason why we are here together co-leading this session. This session will focus on fashion sector, addressing businesses and consumers' experience with product lifetime extension, and it aims to discuss the role of providing product sustainability information to enable more conscious choices. Just to give you an idea about our agenda, each panelist will have 10 minutes to speak. We'll have some moments to have polls, to have your opinion about some aspects. And in the end, we'll have some minutes for questions and answers. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat. We will collect them, monitor the chat, and then collect them for this moment. I'm really excited to hear all our panelists. Hope you are as well. And I also use this opportunity to thank all of them once again for taking the time to be here with us. I'm sure we will have a very great discussion. And now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Lena Wilson, who kindly accepted to our invitation to moderate this session. Lynn has recently completed her PhD at the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow, with the research Cleaning the Loop, Driving Consumer Clothing Circularity. So by this title, you can imagine how much she has to share with us. So please, Lynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bruna. And it's such an honor and a privilege to be here today and to be part of this session. I've been a member of the Consumer International Network since I started my PhD back in 2018. And it's been a huge source of information and networking for me. So I really encourage anyone, if this is your first experience in the program, to really engage further. So I thought what I'd do today is I'd start by just a very quick presentation of my own, which I think we're going to see in a moment. And I just wanted to share with you some of my research perspective. And if we just move on, what I thought I would do is start by sharing my career path with you, because I feel that I've had a closed loop career, and I've come from being trained as a textile designer in a linear economy, having worked in manufacturing and production, both as a micro manufacturer myself and in international development, encouraging micro manufacturing spaces in developing countries. And through that, I then moved on to being a business consultant, and I work in the space of circular business modeling in terms of renting, leasing, and using. And one of the reasons that I moved away from manufacturing was because as a designer maker, I couldn't understand, I couldn't know where my product ended up. I couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't end up in landfill. And now we're evolving really sophisticated transparency models, but in my 30-year career, these evolvements are very new. And of course, as a consumer, that is key to my knowledge in terms of clothing as a product. And I always say, I am the consumer I'm trying to change. It's my behavior. I love fashion. I love clothes. I love engaging and wearing clothes. But I understand the environmental, social, and economic consequences of that. And so that led me to my academic research, which really focuses on consumer disposal. But prior to that, I did have a background in strategy development, Scottish Government agencies in strategy development, in working in the circular textile sector. And this led me to understanding that whilst we're making key advances in the circular economy in textile and clothing, the consumer is still very much seen on the outside of the loop. And I really want to put the consumer at the center of the loop. And looking at the next slide, there's a reason for that. And that's because we see that whilst we know that production has a really big impact in terms of 10% of global carbon emissions, 20% of global water waste, and of course the huge issue of microplastics. In terms of consumption, 8 billion items of clothing are purchased annually. And we know that at least 92 million tons of clothing ends up in landfill globally, of which over 50% could be reused. And so how does this happen? And if we just move on, we can see how the current system of a linear model, where we have resource extraction, textile production, garment construction, and the logistics of moving things to the consumer, ends up where the consumer is acquiring clothing, using it, maintaining it, and storing it. And so this is why, for me, the consumer is key, because the consumer ends up with this whole resource. And when we think about storing, that might be seasonal, it might be hoarding, it might be for other reasons, but we really have to engage with consumers and consumption as a key resource in the circular economy, and change the narrative from the consumer being the problem in a linear economy to the consumer being the key resource in a circular economy. And just moving on, just to demonstrate Why this is important is because the consumer lived experience of clothing is really complicated. And whilst we have some clothing that up to 40% of the average consumer wardrobe is never worn, we have other items of clothing that we all know ourselves that we have worn and worn and worn. And when it comes to how to dispose of that clothing or how to move it on or what we can do with it, most of us who are not working in the sector or not really aware perhaps don't know what to do with it. And my recent research really identified that there is a real misalignment between what consumers are doing with clothing, how they're using it for longevity, but then had the challenges they have at the disposal end and how that impacts on the clothing recycling system. And so in terms of this complexity, if we look at the final model, we can see how we place the consumer at the centre of a circular economy. And that's by thinking back to the linear model. If we move on to this consumer circularity model, we can see that it starts with how consumers access clothing. And I talked on my first slide about opportunities to acquire clothing in a different way through rental, leasing, and borrowing. This keeps it in circulation and stops that idea of hoarding clothing. But then it's about how we maintain it, how we ensure that we keep it in circulation and we're continuously clearing out our wardrobes and clothing isn't threatened by dust mites and moths and things that threaten the deterioration of our clothing. And of course, ensuring that we have those repair skills that keep clothing in use for as long as possible. And then it's about ensuring that we, as consumers, on that last slide, I showed you examples of real consumer clothing at the end of life phase, at a real use phase. And so it's about how we know how to recycle, upcycle, downcycle in an appropriate way. And when we can absolutely do nothing else with our clothing, that we understand the impact of incineration and landfill, and we really, really try to avoid it at all costs. And then, of course, that is through responsible disposal, perhaps through donation. In the UK alone, 60% of clothing that we get rid of is donated to the UK charity retail system. But that charity retail system mimics the traditional retail system, and there are a lot of challenges with that, as well as a lot of opportunities. Passing on and gifting clothing means that you have that traceability. If you actively engage in moving the garment on, then you know where it's gone and you know that it has actually been used or is going to be used. And then, of course, selling it, that's always a great bonus if you can make money out of your used clothing. And again, it also enables that traceability. If you sell it online, you know where it's going to go next. You know that someone's bought it with the intention of wearing it. So, but then we have this outer circle, the industrial circle, that when the clothing is moved into that recycling system, the consumer really loses track of the clothing and perhaps is not aware that there is the possibility that it will go to landfill if it's not in the right condition. And so these are the sort of key challenges and opportunities that I'm really interested in and I work within, and I'm really looking to discussing and hearing about today, about solutions to put the consumer and consumer clothing use cycle at the centre of a circular economy. And I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is a really inspiring entrepreneur. Sorry, I should just say that if you want to get a hold of me, you can contact me at Glasgow University, where Hasna has also been involved in our team in really researching her business model, which Save Your Wardrobe, we're going to hear from Hasna about that, but it is very much a pioneering model. And I'd like to hand over to you, Hasna, to share your business model with us. Thank you, and your journey. Really looking forward to hearing about it. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Lin. It's really nice to be here, and I really relate to your presentation and your background, as I have a similar one. So just to present it to the audience. So my name is Hasna Korda. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Save Your Wardrobe. We are a digital circular platform supporting our users, brands, and retailers in their circular strategy. So the way it all started was pretty much inspired by my culture and the way I grew up. So I come from Tunisia, a country in North Africa, and my family comes from an island in the south. And really early on, they needed to learn how to address resources in a circular way to make sure that their next seasons they would have food, water, and so on. So it was really related to their daily livelihood, and they developed techniques, different techniques to manage the different resources that they had available, or actually not available all year round. So inspired by that, and also after going to Europe to finish my studies and seeing how the culture is completely different and how circularity or sustainability wasn't mainstream at all. And this was back in the early 2000s, so right when the fast fashion movement was starting or accelerating. And so I've realized that consumers and fashion fashion consumers were very attracted to a very wear and dispose type of consumption behavior. So with my background in economics and how to optimize finite resources, I've decided as well to bring the technology to the fashion industry. So an industry that has traditionally really not relied on technology to identify itself and build itself. And yeah, if I can just share a story to the audience about my grandmother, who, in order to make sure that her consumption was circular, when it comes to textile and the fashion industry, she would always gather everything that her children and her grandchildren would wear and commission someone to create carpets based on these fabrics and upcycling this clothing. So that was the trigger for me to understand how can a platform leverage technology to mimic her commitment towards her sustainable values. So how Save Your Wardrobe works, we are again a digital platform that helps people inventor their clothing and understand what they have in their wardrobe. And through a set of features, they are also able to do a retrospective over their fashion consumption and identify when they are being over-consuming or not very when their consumption isn't optimized. And at the end of the day, our aim is to decrease the throwaway culture and also avoid or divert clothing from landfill. And to support us in this mission, what we have built is something we called a service infrastructure platform, where we connect on board an army of skills and craftsmen people, craftspeople. So these often family-owned local businesses have the knowledge and the skills to upcycle clothing, repair clothing, alterate them so that people can wear them again and again, and also enable and unlock the second-hand opportunity for people to monetize their wardrobe, just like Dr. Lin had mentioned. And in parallel, we also work with brands and retailers in supporting them with their circular strategy. So in October last year, we've launched our project with Zalando, and we are supporting them in their mission to extend the life of 50 million items by 2023. And so it is a successful partnership, and we are very excited as well to be launching with other brands in Germany Germany that we will be announcing soon, and it shows how the market and the fashion industry is really mature or looking for circular initiatives and circular solution to respond to a rising demand from their customers. So yeah, our business model is trying to tap on the B2C and the B2B as well, and creating really this circular circular way to address the fashion problem issue of overconsumption, and also the pollution that is generated through disposal of clothing. And as Lynn mentioned as well, a big part of our work is also to understand and gather data, not personal data, but data around the consumption of clothing and how they are managed, or actually not in an optimized way. So we feel like this is an untapped opportunity, as clothing have always been the life cycle of clothing have always stopped at the moment of purchase. So what we are bringing here is the narrative beyond the sale, and what is happening for these items that were once loved and maybe not anymore. So we are gathering all these points and understanding how can we enhance the experience with fashion once the item is in the market, but also how can brands and retailers take responsibility for the items that they've sent into the market, and how can they support their customers in keeping them longer in the loop. So I'm not too sure how long I still have, but if I can also add to my point, that that's an announcement made by Selfridges a few days ago about 50% of their transaction involving and supporting circular business model. I think this is a very ambitious by 2030. So this is a very ambitious target that they set to themselves, and I feel like to be able to move the needle and have an actual impact on the planet and on people, this is something that many more retailers and brands need to adopt. So this is happy to take any question, and at the end of this panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Hasna. And I realized at the beginning, I was so keen to get my own points across that I didn't actually explain this session to everyone. And so I thought I should just explain that we have up to 2 hours here, and we will have questions in the next session. We're going to hear from 3 speakers. We've just heard from you, Hasna, and then we have 2 more speakers to come. And then we're actually going to have a poll that Bruna is going to lead on, and to ask our audience some questions. And then from there, we're going to hear from 2 other speakers. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So an opportunity, like you say, Hasna, to ask you some questions and ask you all our speakers some questions. In the meantime, what I see is some really fantastic contributions in the chat. And this is really important, because I know that my colleagues at UNEP are gathering all of this information that you are feeding in. Like Rakesh, you have some brilliant questions around what could enforcement look like in terms of sustainability claims. Really interesting that we have such an international audience in terms of Amit from India, and Letitia is in Paris. And then we have really interesting information feeding in, such as from Alexandra Catterbo. Alexandra, I'm not sure where you're from, but I think it's really interesting that you're highlighting your report, Sustainable Fashion, ? How companies provide sustainability information to consumers. And that's using the UNEP SCP Consumer Information Guidelines. So it's really a fantastic session already, gathering this knowledge and information that whilst we have our speakers on this platform today, we're also gathering as we go really important information from other areas of the globe. Thank you very much, Hasnan. And you raised a lot of points in your presentation, and you're clearly doing really important work, again, on an international platform. And I look forward to discussing that later. In the meantime, we're going to hear from our second contributor, who is Lena Garches from Lena's Closet. And Lena is going to share with us her business model and what exactly Lena's Closet is and what her journey has been to this successful business model in the last few years. Lena, welcome. It's so exciting to have you here. And please, could you start by telling us where you're from and where Lena's Closet is situated? Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lynn, for your presentation. I'm so happy to be here, and really such an honor to share all the knowledge with you girls. Where I'm Lena Garces. I'm a wife, a mom, economist, and personal shopper. I'm founder of Lena's Closet, secondhand experience shop. Well, I live in a small town in Cucuta from Colombia, in a city with the border with Venezuela, where the subject of sustainability is not really known. So, I'm just working on it. And instead, I saw an opportunity to mix it with fashion that I'm passionate about it. So I'm going to share with you my presentation. Yeah, here it is. Are you seeing? Okay. Yes, confirm. Okay, so this whole story starts because clothes give me the security to get out of 10 years of a horrible disease called bulimia. So I start helping other women to feel more secure themselves, because 8 of 10 women show insecurity when dressing comes along. If you just put a woman in front of the mirror, normally they just look all the bad things from their self. So I decide to start this because like a personal shopper and image consultant, because they give me the security to start growing up like a woman, like being self. So I said, okay, if I can do it, of course I do also. I can do for people. So everything starts well. Or that my clients didn't want to get right off. To them, well, if
just whilst we're trying to get Lena back and to sort that out, I just want to go back to the chat, because I do really want to encourage you to put your questions in there and put your thoughts as they come to you. I'm not sure if we can actually put Alexandra on speaker, if that's possible. I think it would be really interesting to hear a quick word from Alexandra, or to hear more information about the sustainable fashion, how companies provide sustainability information to consumers. Perhaps if we can't sort that out now, perhaps we can, Alexandra, get you to tell us a bit more in the chat. And here we have Lena back. So welcome back, Lena. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Where did you hear me until? Okay. Can you just pass another one, please? You listen to me?
Great, we can hear you. Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. So I was telling you and all the audience that this story starts because clothes gave me the security to get out of a 10 years horrible disease, the bulimia. So I start helping another woman to feel more security of themselves because 8 of 10 women show insecurity when your dress comes along. If you put a woman just in front of one of my clients just in front of a mirror, they just go and focus to the negative things of their bodies. So I decided to get a certificate as an image consultant of personal shopper, and one of the most sell exercise with my clients was their wardrobe analysis. So what I take out of an excellent clothes from my client, they didn't want to get right off. So I said to them and I asked, why just I sell that piece? What if we just give a second chance of that piece? And they say, of course, yes. And was in 2015 how Lena's Clothes is born, a solution to give a woman back their self-esteem through the secondhand clothes business, taking care of the environment. Can you just pass another one, please? Okay, so the question is, how am I building this model in my community? Well, I take every day we work creating awareness, connecting themselves, being on your own self. Is the most difficult things to do, but we work every day on that. And explain them that secondhand clothing doesn't mean it's for the poor people, it's for people who doesn't who not class who hasn't had class. It's the secondhand clothes come with a bad energy. It's dirty. It's a lot of misinformation of ideas, specifically here in my country, where all the people just live with their parents, and so it was a very very hard journey. But I just start talking, every day in my website, in my different areas to communicate in front of them. So I've been learning that my own clients can be my best suppliers. So it's the way to teach them the concept, and also that we can reuse clothes. So recycling is the best way to show our clients that we can transform our clothes in a unique piece, because we have this type of business. We got reusing and recycling. So they say, okay, yeah, it's not really for that type of idea we have. And it's been 7 years working on that type of different and misinformed idea from using a secondhand clothes. Can you just change for another one, please? With all that, we are a company that have been growing 40% in the last 6 years in sales terms. But always our huge challenge has been the online sales, because in my country, there is not still trust in that way of buying clothes. So we've been growing a number of clients that are also our suppliers, clients that start having the idea that to sell a secondhand clothes is to tell a history, a story. So it's been an amazing change from the women and people, also the guys who comes and say, I want a piece with the story. So it's very passionate that, and very to be happy to see that the results. Here is I want to show you our business have been growing in terms of sales, but most important, the satisfy the clients, where they know the concept of circular economic using clothes that looks great on their bodies. That's the most important thing for us. This is a different. Can you change different photos of a friend with styles who comes with Lena's closet and who believe that that the connecting your inner self with your way to look through with the second-hand clothes is the best way to support the environment and the sustainability. Thank you. Oh, yeah. That's the next one for the yeah, it's the next, please. Oh yeah, this is a still friends that I was talking to you. The different girls who just tell us that the connecting your inner self with the way you look through with the second-hand clothes is the best way to support the sustainability and to the environment. So I really been working with this with this type of concept in my country and in my city, which is very small, but the results just start going out. Thank you very much.
It's a really fantastic, inspiring presentation on how new business models in clothing can work, they can be successful. We do see pioneers trying different business models and at different stages of evolvement. And the more success stories we see, the more we really want to get on board and do it ourselves. I think there's a real common theme coming through between myself, Hasna, and your presentation, that clothes are personal. Experience with clothing is very personal. And this equates to, from the research, we see that a lot of the reason that clothing is hoarded is because of the change in body styles, body size, experiences as we grow, as we change, as our lifestyles change, as we go from different stages of life. And so I think that what your model is really demonstrating is how we can facilitate that, how we can support people to access what they need to access as their lifestyle changes or their body changes. So thank you very much. And I really
thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. And I see there's a fantastic questions evolving in the chat. One from Dr. Maureen Kajo from Nigeria. I'm not going to address questions now, but I don't want you to think I haven't seen them or I've overlooked them, but we're really going to address these questions later on. And some exciting news about the question session is we're actually ahead of time. And so this gives us more time to explore those questions. In the meantime, I'd like to invite our next speaker. And I'd like to say it's very coincidental that all our speakers are women, but it's possibly representative of the industry, which is 70% made up of women. But for any male participants, I don't want you to feel excluded. This was completely incidental. And Kaluri, Sumya, you are going to share your business model from India with us, and how that business model, from something in relation to clothing recycling and upcycling, how we think of it at a very micro scale as something we do in our homes, you have made into a business model employing people in your area. And I'm really excited about listening to your business journey and what's happening in Dwij, DWIG.
Yes,
Okay, Dwij. Fantastic. So the floor is yours, and welcome, Sumya. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Lean. I'm Soumya Kaluri. I come from India, and my startup is based out of Mumbai in India. So first of all, I really love the the flow of the event, where the first speaker was talking about how important it is to save the closet, and the second was speaking more about how you could redo your wardrobe by exchanging, giving, or creating an ecosystem out of what you already have. So I think I come a stage later where you have seen that it's not possible to exchange, or maybe you cannot really save it anymore due to any reasons. Then that's where my startup comes in. So Dwij, which in Sanskrit means second life. So essentially we are giving second life to the used textiles. So as we go ahead, we'll find out like what it is. There's a lot of context that is already set in right now, where we are talking about there's 100 billion USD dollar worth textiles that are getting landfilled, and the stats say that it is like 94% of these could have been reworn or upcycled. I'm sure everyone here is like aware of what upcycling is, like where we are kind of creating value out of the products which are like already wasted. So instead of downcycling it to some material which is going to lose its value, we are going to put that back, the material back into the system, and create value out of it. And as many of the people here would understand, that it's always better to upcycle than to recycle. And the second pillar that we see is like the mass manufacturing that is happening due to fast fashion, and the ill effects of that being like people, like there are like large scale sweatshops that are being created, where there's a problem with the uh, uh, like you know with the uh, yeah, with the workers. And especially in India, we had this very good ecosystem where our elders used to preserve these materials, and could make something out of it. Like they used to make like blankets, or like use their used stuff into like some kind of cleaning stuff or something. So there's recently a phenomena where people are losing this practice is getting disappeared. So at which what we do is we source post-consumer textiles, and from different second-hand markets, which is also known as chindi markets colloquially in India, and we get them thoroughly washed at industrial washers. So here we are particularly focusing on denim as of now, because we see that denim is a material that you would get bored out of it, but it won't like really burn out or something, or your style might have changed, or your size might have changed. So we are focusing on denim for now. So it includes post consumer jeans like the ones that you have used, or it could be post industrial or pre consumer jeans, which are like the cut-offs or waste from denim industry. So we strive to become do like a zero waste manufacturing practice, where we see that every small bit that comes to into our workshop is used for some purpose. So like once we are done with making of say for example bags that we are currently doing, then whatever the leftover is made, that we use to make handmade jewelry. So here we are trying to employ as many as people to do more of a handwork, and then also to use some material that is actually a waste. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. What we do as a brand is to create a ethical and a zero waste textile upcycling brand, where we are creating some kind of social impact, and we also want to make upcycling like a everyday household thing. So like in future we want more and more people to come and upcycle their own products at their own convenience, so they value the products more. So through the entire process, what we are doing is, since the products are upcycled, since we are using waste, each product that comes out is going to be unique. And since it is going to be unique, everyone feel like they have something very one of a kind thing. And in this we always use when we are taking all these efforts of buying them, getting them washed, cutting them, and then making customized products out of it, like take almost like tailor made products out of it, then it's important that we have like quality that is very good, that would last it long. So we use like superior quality zippers like YKK ones. And for employees we provide ethical wages, and we also do the skill development as and when required. For society obviously, and for the society and the government, it's obviously reducing the textile waste, and it's also reducing their individual carbon footprint. And people who are interested in focusing on end of life of every material they use, it's going to kind of give a impetus to their lifestyle. Yeah, we can move on. So what we do is we procure our material from chindi markets, that's second-hand markets. We also accept corporate donations or community donations, and also we are kind of creating this resource efficiency, like where the residual of any manufacturing unit comes to us, and we are like putting it to use. On the manufacturing front, we have our own workshop. We have like self-help groups who work for us, and also we train women, and then they can also work from home. And then like if there is any mm, uh, if anyone who is looking to become more and more financially independent while they are working from home, that's something that we look into. Then our marketing channels, like we mostly have a online marketing, and then we also conduct a lot of educational workshops where you give more knowledge of why you have to do this, and what all you can do, and how you can improve your lifestyle, and also work towards reducing your carbon footprint. And we also participate in a lot of exhibitions, and mostly our sales are through our website, and then corporate giftings. So like if anyone is wanting to give a written gift for their wedding, or to give their employees, then that's a place where they can always approach us. And also we plan to start a community buyback system, where if somebody wants to give their denim, maybe we could look at ways how we can give back a product to them, so that there's some kind of loop that is in place. So yeah, as the trend, like everyone here in Fashion Revolution wants to see the person behind the product. So we have like our workers, like we display their names on our website, and then when the product is given, there's like a small card that goes with the product, saying that this person has made your bag, and this is the care details, and this is what has gone into the product while making this product. And it's like lot of ecosystem that is getting developed around waste. But of course there are a lot of challenges to this ecosystem, because you're entirely dependent on waste. And like when there are supply chain disruptions, you have to kind of do the things to like make it go. So the biggest challenge being like you cannot have like a very lean manufacturing. You have to always stock the products in advance, like the material, so that you will be able to supply in bulk. And also the other challenge is like, since like it could be a challenge, or it could be a good point for us, like each product is unique. So at times conveying this to the customers through online platforms.
Oh, we've just lost Sumya just at the end there. Hopefully we'll get her back. I think really interesting business model, and I think I'm interested in sort of the volume, how many employees are working
Of
with
a
them, and the sort of the ethics of the model in terms of how many workers, how many units of product. I really empathize with her in terms of the understanding to the consumer that each product is unique. It's not a mass manufactured product, so each design can't necessarily be replicated in the same way. And this is a positive in the sense of having that unique product, but can also be a challenge in terms of when we do want that macro mass manufacturing of product. I don't know if we're going to get Sumya back. I was really enjoying her presentation. I think what we could probably do is ask Sumya some key questions, and she can perhaps finish her presentation when we get to the Q&A. In the meantime, we have a really exciting segment for you where I'm now going to ask you to do some work. And I'm going to hand over to Bruna to tell us about the work that she'd like us to do. Thank you very much. Nice to see you, Bruna.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank Hasna, Soumya, and Lena as well for your very inspiring presentation. It was very interesting to notice the connection between their experience, right? Your experience and your studies as well. like different circular strategies. I could see one about digital platform, another about secondhand clothes and focusing on empowering women, and Somia business centered in on giving a second life of clothes also to consumers. And I was connecting this with what Dr. Lin was saying about putting the consumer in the center of the cycle. So it was really inspiring. It's been really inspiring to me until now. So now we have a few minutes dedicated to a pool. So we have 3 questions that we would like to have your opinion on all of them. So Camila and UNEP team will share them with you, and then you can select the best alternative for each of you, and we will share the results. So let's start. Just some minutes for us to share the pool. Let's see. So I can maybe start just giving you the first question. It will be, as businesses, what is the biggest challenge to innovating towards a circular economy in fashion? So you have the alternatives, and you just choose the ones that suits better for you. Let's see if it will be there.
I think we have such a big audience today, 70 people on this call. I think we're going to have some
Yes,
great
right
responses here. Yeah.
Okay, so we can't see it, right?
And I know with that amount of people, it can take a little bit of time for all of the results to come through. So we'll just give you plenty of time.
Yes, let's see.
And then once we're sure that everyone has responded to, who wants to, has responded to the poll, I think actually, Bruno, we're going to discuss the results of the poll later on in the Q&A, I think.
Yes, maybe it's better. So should we just give some minutes, so you can answer, and then we comment, right?
Yeah, I think we'll do that. I think to our participants, yeah, take your time, have a think, and
Yes.
please respond. We're really good for time. I'm really keen that we have as much time for Q&A as possible. So to everyone, make sure that you're having a think and responding to the poll.
Yes, so just to put everybody on the same page, so we have 3 questions in this moment that we are asking you to answer. So this first one, as business, what is the biggest challenge to innovating towards a circular economy in fashion? And the second one is, as a consumer, so in the other hand, as a consumer, what is the biggest challenge to making more sustainable choices of fashion? And finally, we also ask, have you ever tried product lifetime extension services such as secondhand clothes, reuse, repair, upcycling, etc. for clothing? And we wonder how it was for you. How was your experience? So it's just for us to have an idea about your opinion, your experience as well, and then we can comment later on the results. Okay, so maybe we can move on. Lynn, thank you very much. And I give the floor back to you again.
Thank you so much. And so we're moving on to our final 2 speakers today. And the first one is someone who is a huge authority in this area from UNEP, Bettina Heller. And Bettina is going to give us early insights from the Sustainable Fashion Communication Playbook. And she's going to give an overview and next steps of UNEP textile work focused on circularity. And I certainly am really excited to hear, Bettina, what you're going to tell us. And so thank you very much. And without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn, and thanks everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you today, and I've been really enjoying listening also to the other panelists. So we can put my presentation on right away, please. So I'll be speaking a bit about sustainability information, of course, in the fashion sector. And at UNEP, we have identified that there are 3 planetary crises that we are facing at the moment, which are the climate emergency, biodiversity and pollution, and waste. And we do require immediate action across all sectors for this. And we feel that the fashion sector is a key one to help address that crisis. Why is it so key? It's because the fashion sector really has the power of persuasion, cultural reach, and influence, but also the ability to generate desire and demand. And especially fashion communication, which we're here to discuss today, can have a huge role in shifting towards more sustainable lifestyle and leading by example. We also know that fashion, of course, is essential to human culture because it does inspire identity, as we've heard also from Lena before, for instance. It does also inspire value and action for billions of people around the world. And on the other side, it also possesses one of the most influential marketing machines on the planet. And I have noted Cecilia's question in the chat about what annoys us most about fashion marketing at the moment. And I'll take the diplomatic way to answer that. And I'm going to speak more in this presentation about what we would like to see more from marketing and communication around fashion. So it's very timely we speak today about this. If we can move on to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of what UNEP is doing around this work. I won't spend long, but we have published a first report, which is called the Global Stocktaking Report, around 2 years back, which looks more into mapping the global value chain and identifying the different sustainability impacts and hotspots along the value chain so that we know where to prioritize our efforts first. And we did not do that alone, but we relied on a lot of consultation, and the great relationships we had with the experts for that report turned into a wider expert community around sustainability and circularity in textiles, with around 600 members as of today, and we are sending out a monthly newsletter, so you're very welcome to check that out and to also become part of this. And yeah, I'm thrilled to hear everything that we've been hearing here today, and we'll look forward to also featuring that and feeding that back to the community. In terms of the communication space, we have developed a sustainable communication strategy, which will be available shortly on our website. And the strategy really aims at changing the narrative of the sector so that we move from a narrative that focuses around extraction, exploitation, and disposable consumption towards one that is around regeneration, equity, and care. If we move on, we can see sort of what's coming up. So we have 2 big knowledge products coming up. The first one is a report that we call the roadmap because it outlines what each stakeholder can do to help in the transition towards more sustainability and circularity of the sector. We do zoom in that report also on the actions that everybody that's communicating with consumers can take. And this report should be released before the end of the year. At the same time, we are working very closely connected to that on the Sustainable Fashion Consumer Playbook that will be out early next year. And I won't go into detail yet because this is what my presentation will be about later on. So we can look, first of all, on the next slide in the environmental hotspots that we have identified along the textile value chain. And I could spend a lot of time on this slide only, which I won't. But what I find important to note is that we really have diverse hotspots all along the value chain, be they around climate, around nature, or around pollution. But what's really interesting is that the role of consumers and consumption in changing and addressing those is huge. So for instance, if we only look at climate, we know that the highest climate reduction potential is by using clothes longer and by changing the care behavior. So the washing temperature, the frequency of washing, etc. So the topic of product lifetime extension and using those items that were already produced longer, it's really something that can bring a lot of value in this discussion. On the next slide, you can see how we envision sort of moving towards a more circular value chain. So the idea is, of course, to close the loop, but the idea is also to make sure that whatever we already produced can stay at the highest possible value the longest. And this resonates very much with what the other panelists have already said. You can see in the sort of brownish color here different value retention loops. And a lot of them need consumer behavior change and consumer buy-in. So for instance, you can see at the use stage, we have a value retention loop of refusing and reducing, but we also have loops of reuse and repair that of course also need consumers to take up on these offers and to ask for them. So that brings me to the actual topic of the presentation, which is the Sustainable Fashion Communication Playbook. And here we really look into the consumer role is crucial, but of course consumers need to be enabled to take those choices and to change their behavior. And here we find that everybody communicating with consumers has a big potential to change the narrative and to engage consumers better. So the playbook is for anybody responsible for any stage of communication in fashion. So this would be, for instance, those working in marketing or advertising, but also content or social media at brands and retailers, but going beyond companies, also the wider communication ecosystem. So for instance, journalists, digital platforms, influencers, educators, agencies, and so on. The playbook was informed by a joint consultation that we held with UNFCCC and the Fashion Charter that UNFCCC is hosting last year, and we convened around 160 different experts in this area. And that consultation then resulted in an updated commitment to the UNFCCC Fashion Charter at the COP, the climate COP last year. And the new commitment that was launched there reads to align consumer and industry communication efforts to a 1.5 degree or science-based targets initiative compatible pathway as set out by the Paris Agreement goals, as well as a more just and equitable future. And so what we're trying in the playbook is to look at that commitment and to establish principles that can help work towards this shared vision. So I'll dive a bit more into details on the next slide. So this is work in progress. We're actually currently preparing the peer review for that. So there might be some changes. But where we stand right now is that we want to portray these principles as a pyramid. And they are designed to provide communicators with clarity and standards for best practices in sustainable fashion communication. And the pyramid is, of course, there to show a hierarchy of adoption for this. So at the bottom, at the lowest level, so really the must meet, you can see principles around leading with science. And this is really the starting place for all communication. And I want to stress that this is very much aligned with the Consumer Information Program guidelines for providing product sustainability information, and especially the 5 fundamental principles within that tool. So it's really about making sure that the information that reaches the consumer is reliable, is trustworthy, there is no greenwashing, everything is based on science. And it means to commit to accurate reporting and transparent communication efforts, as well as avoiding any form of exaggeration or omission. If we move to the next level in the pyramid, no, sorry, I'm just moving the pyramid, but we're going to stay on that slide. We are looking at the cultural level. So this encompasses changing behavior and practices, as well as reimagining values. So this is where building begins for a new narrative for the sector. So it's not just about being data-led in the representation of the work of a company, but it's also about providing a new vision for consumers that they can embrace as they are changing towards more sustainable lifestyles. And this is where we really think that the focus of the wider communication stakeholders should be today, beyond the efforts of the sustainability teams in the companies. So it's also very important that it's within companies that the communication and marketing departments talk very closely also to the sustainability teams. And we also think this is where the lion's share of the work will be, but also where most of the creativity can be had. So it's also a very positive and exciting thing. So you can see this is about the changing behaviors, is about eradicating all messages, encouraging overconsumption, and also championing positive change, so that we really talk about positive things and what can be done by this change rather than doomsday pictures. And reimagining values is about spotlighting new role models and notions of aspiration, celebrating the ecological, cultural, and social values of the industry, and also focusing on more inclusive marketing and storytelling. And then at the upper level of the pyramid, we are at the advocacy level, so it's the peak. And this is really the leadership level of sustainable communication, and it's about going beyond your own organization and practices and supporting broader sustainable change within the industry and the sector. So the idea with this pyramid is not to say this must be followed step by step, but it's just to give an idea of the hierarchy, and each of the principles are to be considered and followed together, of course. And it's supposed to provide a pathway for a communication to follow. In the final playbook, we're going to have much more details on this. There's going to be sort of a list of do's and don'ts, and we're also looking at case studies to show how those principles can be put into practice. And in general, at the level of UNEP, we're looking forward to working with many stakeholders in that space to continue driving change also in that area. So with that, we can go to my last slide just to show you a few links. So just a reminder, if you want to be part of our monthly newsletter around sustainable and circular textiles, please sign up, email us, and you can also find more information on our website. Thanks so much. I'll pass back to Lynn.
Thank you very much, Bettina. That was really informative, and I know a lot of work has gone into in the background at UNEP, and really looking forward to the consumer playbook. I think this is going to be potentially a game changer in terms of supporting Consumer International members and wider organisations to really support consumers. So really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to move on to our final speaker today, Ruth Mcgilp, who is the Fashion Revolution Communications Manager. I've known Ruth for a long time, and we've both been on our journey of sustainable fashion in Scotland, and now it's in London. And so it's so exciting to see you here today, Ruth. And I'm really looking forward to your presentation update from Fashion Revolution. So welcome, Ruth. And I think you're going to share with us insights about the information and product services that consumers want and need to be able to make more sustainable choices in fashion. And so with that, thank you very much, Ruth. Look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me, and for all the speakers. I found that really interesting. As the communications manager at Fashion Revolution, and having worked with a lot of brands and retailers with their marketing, the UNEP communications playbook and the hierarchy of needs is such a valuable tool for communicators. So I'm excited to learn more about that. I'm just wondering if I can get my slides up. Great. So yeah, my name is Ruth Mcgilp, and I'm the communications manager at Fashion Revolution, which is a global movement campaigning for systemic change in the fashion industry. So over the past few years, we've seen a lot of initiatives from brands and multi-stakeholders putting more information out there about sustainability. And, this conference is about information for consumers, but somewhere along the line, the purpose of that has has become more about driving profit than actually empowering sustainable choices. So I think somebody in the chat said it's not necessarily that there's not enough information, it's that it's the wrong information. We call this information dumping. For example, many brands have a huge sustainability page on their website, loads and loads of reports, lots of social media activity and events and influencer collaborations. But what they're not telling us is some really fundamental information about their supply chain. So without that transparency on what's actually going on behind the scenes in their operations and supply chain, it's really impossible for consumers to know that what they're saying about their eco-friendly collection is true. It's impossible to know what their clothes are really made from and where they're made and under what conditions. So next slide. So first, I just wanted to define what we mean by transparency. So transparency here is the public disclosure of information that enables people to hold decision makers to account. And for the fashion industry, it means sharing that information about their supply chains, about their business practices, and most importantly, what are the impacts of these practices on workers, on communities, and on the environment. And if we move on to the next slide, this will take you to our project that we've been working on for the past 7 years. The latest edition just came out in July. This is the Fashion Transparency Index. So it's a report which analyzes 250 of the world's largest fashion brands and retailers from lots of different sectors all around the world, based on how much they publicly disclose. And this is across hundreds of different indicators, including human rights, environmental policies, etc. So the index, is important to say, it's not a sustainability index. It's not a measurement of how sustainable or ethical a brand is. And it's not meant to be a shopping guide for consumers to be like, okay, I'll shop from that brand, but not from this one. It's more about holding those brands to account for their claims about sustainability by analyzing what they're actually publicly disclosing about their supply chain. And ultimately, this helps us to combat greenwashing when, we can check facts versus claims on social media. So next slide. So this is our theory of change. This is why we believe that transparency is so powerful. Transparency leads to scrutiny. We put this research out, and then that enables elected stakeholders to scrutinize that information. So if a brand says we pay our workers a living wage, we can check that against their claim. And then ultimately that leads to accountability. We can hold brands to account when we have information. For example, in 2013, when the Rana Plaza factory collapsed in Bangladesh, most of the brands that were actually producing in that factory kind of skirted responsibility. And the only way that they were brought into those legal proceedings was by survivors searching through the rubble to find clothing labels, because those brands did not publish on their website which factories they manufactured in. So it was from there that the fashion revolution movement towards greater transparency was born, because if we don't even know where our clothes are made, how are we supposed to ensure safe working conditions for the people that make them? So we just put out our research in 2022, and it found that, as usual, transparency in the global fashion industry amongst those 250 major brands is just too slow. Just a 1% increase from last year, and that average score is just 24%. So we have seen this increase over time, and we do a lot of work behind the scenes to incentivize these brands to disclose more information, but it's not quick enough, considering we're in a climate crisis, we're in a cost of living crisis, and all these intersecting issues are affecting people today. We don't really have time to wait for brands to disclose this information. So it basically means, we don't yet know that answer to the question of who made my clothes. Not a single brand scored over 80%. So none of these brands are 100% transparent. So even the sort of highest scorers are not good enough yet. If we go to the next slide, this will show you that, most of the brands are really scoring in that lower category towards the left. And we see on the right that, not a single brand scores above 80, and only 3 brands score higher than 70%. a lot of the scores that brands receive are based on their policies and their promises, but not a lot of that weighting of the score is coming from the actions that they take. And that's what we really need to see, because as we've seen a lot in the news recently about legal crackdowns on greenwashing claims, you know, it's not good enough to say that you're sustainable or you care about workers. We need to see that evidence. We really need to see greater transparency across the whole supply chain, because this allows consumers to make informed decisions, but more importantly, it allows those affected stakeholders on the ground to hold brands accountable when things do go wrong, which they do so often in the fashion world, from Myanmar to China to Pakistan. You know, we need to be able to trace back who is responsible for redressing these issues. So I'm going to quickly go through just a few of the key findings. You can find the full report on the Fashion Revolution website if you want to dive a little bit deeper. But here we have 48% of brands disclose their first tier suppliers. So first tier is generally where clothing is cut and sewn together. So this doesn't seem like very much, but it's a big increase that we've seen over previous years of brands publishing those factory lists. But it's just the first tier. And anyone that has worked in fashion or even made a piece of clothing knows that there's a lot of stages before the cutting and sewing begins. You know, where does that fabric come from? Where were those raw materials grown, etc. And although this 48% number is quite positive, it means that 52% of brands are disclosing no information about their suppliers, even at the first tier. So we really don't even have that most basic information beyond the, you know, made in Bangladesh or made in Cambodia label. We don't actually have the name, address, contact details of the factory where that garment was made. If we go to the next slide, we'll see another finding. We also look a lot at environmental impact of brand supply chains and operations. And the most urgent thing really to look at right now is decarbonizing those supply chains, transitioning to green energy. And we see a lot of brands investing in so-called sustainable materials, but we don't see a lot of commitments from brands about making their actual supplier sites, you know, net zero and transitioning to green energy. So only 29% are even publishing a decarbonization target that covers their supply chain. A lot of brands talk about being net zero, but a lot of the time they're talking about just their own operations. So that's like their stores and their offices and maybe their warehouses. Very few are talking about it at the factory level. And we want to see that verified, as Bettina mentioned. It needs to be led with science, and it needs to be verified with the Science Based Targets initiative. Next slide. So another thing that we focused on this year is production volume, because we know that the speed and the pace and the volume at which mainstream brands produce clothing is not sustainable, no matter what those clothes are made of. And strikingly here, we have 85% of brands not disclosing their annual production volumes. So we know that there are too many clothes on this planet. There's enough clothes to last us, you know, many lifetimes, but brands are quite scared to tell us just how many that is. We see landfills piling up of textile waste in Chile and in Ghana, but very few brands are saying, you know, we produce 100 million tons of garments every year and we are part of the problem. So we want to see brands taking accountability for their overproduction and for what happens to those clothes that don't get sold. Another finding is about microfibers. We've had previous speakers touch on this issue of synthetic fabrics shedding microplastics, which often end up in the ocean. But only 24% of brands are talking about how they're minimizing microfibers, whether that's through a change in materials or you know, other things they're investing in or advocating for, like microfiber filters on washing machines. We know that textiles are the largest source of microplastics in the ocean. You know, we see a lot of news stories about single-use plastics, plastic bottles and straws and bags. But there's less visible issue of microscopic fibers, which we can find anywhere on Earth. It's been found on Mount Everest, in the Arctic, right at the bottom of the ocean. We personally have been doing projects locally here in the UK where we found them in rivers and lakes, even in the most rural areas. So we really need to see brands addressing this and then publicly, admitting to being part of that problem and how they're addressing it too. This is another water-related one. We know that the textile industry is a huge contributor to water pollution. And I'd really recommend watching the documentary River Blue, which is quite striking in just how bad this pollution is in textile producing areas, in terms of dyeing denim, leather tanning. Those wet processing stages of the supply chain are incredibly polluting to rivers that people rely on, animals rely on, plants rely on, and the fashion industry has a lot to answer for. They have a responsibility to publish these results of how polluting their operations are that they invest in, but currently only 11% of brands are publishing their wastewater test results, which it begs the question, what are they hiding? Just a few more key findings now. So this is really about greenwashing, because as I said, there's a lot of brands making a lot of noise about sustainability, but we're not seeing that real, true transparency behind the scenes. So we see 45% of brands publishing a target on sustainable materials. I think another speaker mentioned Selfridges, talking about sustainable materials, and I'm not familiar with how they define a sustainable material, but we know that many brands don't actually define what they mean by sustainable, because sustainable does not have a legal definition, and it's very subjective, as I'm sure everyone in this chat might describe it differently. Only 30% are really disclosing that. So do they mean recycled? Do they mean organic? Do they mean it's more durable? Do they mean it's with low impact dyes? The list can go on, but if brands aren't even telling us that basic definition, then how are we supposed to know as consumers what sustainable really means? Another thing that we see brands talk about a lot on social media particularly is, they show their solidarity with racial justice, gender justice movements. They talk about how they care about diversity and inclusivity. But this is very surface level, and very rarely does it actually apply to their own supply chains. So we know that the majority of our clothes and footwear and accessories are made in the global south, usually by women of color. And these brands are not publishing what they're actually doing in their supply chain to ensure racial and ethnic equality for those women who make their clothes. It's much more about their own audiences here in the West. We know that a lot of ethnic and caste-based discrimination happens within supplier factories, and we don't have transparency from brands about what they're doing to address that. Just a couple more findings, I think. Sorry, there's so many findings, so it's been difficult to pick some out, but I thought these were the most striking. Another one here, relating to the supply chain. So we see a huge amount of gender-based violence in supply chains, and this is mostly because the majority of machinists, for example, are women, and the majority of factory owners are men, who are paid more and have more power and influence. So we do see a lot of abuse and harassment. Again, brands talk a lot about empowering women, for example, on International Women's Day, but they're not publishing any data about gender-based labor violations in their own supplier facilities. Another thing about suppliers here, only 13% of brands are disclosing how many of their supplier facilities have trade unions. And we do see a lot of brands committing to freedom of association, to collective bargaining on their policies on their website, for example. But then they're continuing to source from countries where it's impossible or dangerous or even illegal to be part of or to form a union. So we really need this to go beyond just the lip service of saying they support it. next slide. Yeah, I think this is the final slide. So this is the most shocking one to me, that 96% of brands don't publish whether their workers are being paid a living wage, nor do they disclose if they isolate labor costs in their pricing. So that means when a brand is negotiating with a supplier on price, they're not taking into consideration how much the workers themselves will be paid by that supplier. Again, we see a lot of brands committing publicly to ethical sourcing, but if we don't see data on living wages, we cannot believe that those brands are ethical. So just on the final slides here, you'll just see a quick summary of some of the results. So you can see, again, like I mentioned, a lot of that score comes from policies and commitments, but not a lot comes from that know, show and fix. So not a lot is coming from the actual action, which follows up from those policies. You can see the highest scoring brands this year. So we've got OVS, Kmart, Target, H&M, North Face, Timberland, Vans, and some others. Again, they're not 100%, so we wouldn't congratulate them for that score, because it's 100% is really the minimum we're looking for. But the lowest scoring brands have a lot of work to do, and in there we have luxury brands like Tom Ford and Max Mara, and also fast fashion like Fashion Nova as well. The next slide has another quick summary, some of the brands that have moved high, and a lot of that is from the work that we and our allies across the supply chain have been doing behind the scenes. And a lot of brands end up decreasing their scores because they change ownership. Interestingly, Patagonia had a decrease in scores, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen the news today about Patagonia's founder committing to give over his company to climate justice organizations, which is great. But we also need to see that transparency in Patagonia's own supply chain as well. And then finally, at the bottom here, you can see that we're seeing a big increase in the number of brands disclosing their first tier manufacturers. But as we move further down the supply chain towards processing facilities and raw material suppliers, we're seeing a lot less disclosure. And we know that exploitation thrives in hidden places. It thrives further down the supply chain where more outsourcing and subcontracting is done. For example, there is forced labor in the cotton industry. We see a lot of gender-based violence in the textile mills. So we really need to see an increase in transparency right down to that raw material level. But the positive thing is that when we started the Fashion Transparency Index, it was 0%. So we have seen a significant increase, and that's partly due to the interest that consumers have in knowing more about where their clothes are made. So just to summarize, the purpose of the Transparency Index is, again, it's not a shopping guide. It's meant to enable consumers, and as we call them, citizens, because we're so much more than just people who buy things, to hold those brands accountable for their claims, to hold, their policymakers to account for, legal accountability from those corporations. And we provide that information free and open source to anybody, including investors, shareholders, journalists, civil society, to really scrutinize what's going on in those supply chains of brands that control a huge proportion of fashion's economic contribution. I think there's.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for that extensive overview of the tool. And now we're going to move to questions. And unfortunately, we're just a little short on time for questions. And I wonder if we have any questions in the chat. I know that there were questions earlier on, and I'm joined by Bruna, who, Bruna, do you want to, are there any questions in the chat? That I know that we have one here from, we have one from Dr. Maureen in Nigeria. And I think, Maureen, what you're asking is whether consumers are aware of are they recycling the low value clothing, or are they aware? Sorry, I've lost your question. Yes.
It's really on the beginning, right?
Yes. So
yes. So maybe
of consumers in products recycling, do price contribute to decision making? So I think that's a really interesting question in terms of, I'm wondering if you mean the cost of the garment in the first place, and how that impacts on how the consumer disposes of the garment. And I'm not sure that we have a lot of data in that area in terms of what consumers are doing. And certainly in my own research, which is qualitative based, it's very much about how consumers make that choice. But what we find is that it's very subjective in terms of how consumers evaluate the price of a garment, the quality of the garment at the disposal stage. And this makes it really challenging in terms of the quality of clothing being disposed of to different recycling routes. So then we see in the charity retail system, for example, that there is a lot of clothing that's donated, and consumers are perhaps doing a sort of clothing dump and not sure whether that clothing can be resold or not, but thinking, well, perhaps it's going to go somewhere. But I think we need a lot more research in this area.
Maybe I can just join Lynn, because I found here a question from Cecilia Parker. She's from the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, and she asks, wait, let me see. Currently heading up on our work on greenwashing in the fashion sector. Yes, she's mentioned about their work. So what are the things that annoy panelists the most about marketing in the fashion sector? So maybe I can ask Bettina if you want to start, as your work is really related, please. And the other ones, please feel free to give your contributions as well.
Sure, and as I said before, I prefer to take it more diplomatically and say rather what we'd like to see more of. So I think what we'd like to see more of is really science-based communication in line with the guidelines for providing product sustainability information. We'd like to see more communication and positive messaging around, circular models. So let's keep your clothes longer, repair them, reuse them, buy secondhand, rather than, buy something new every 2 months and pushing these trends. So I think for us, it's really about keeping things in the loop longer and making sure that the business value is dematerialized, so that the value doesn't only come from selling more items, but also from things such as consumers using repair services and others. So I think that's what we'd like to see more of.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bettina. If other panelists want to share, please feel free. The floor is yours as well. And then we will look for the next question. So you have some minutes if you want to pop up.
Hasna, do you have any comments on the marketing and the challenges? Because you are creating a new app, a new business model that's about promoting and marketing a new culture for consumer. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, actually, it's a very we thank you for the opportunity. Actually, I wanted to talk more about our partnership with the University of Glasgow and the research that we've been doing since 2018 or 19 around adoption of circularity, and also the challenges that people face when changing their behavior, and making them comply with their intentions. And what has been transpiring, it was that people felt overwhelmed by the way they consume, and they were very keen to adopt circular initiatives, and also access more easily repairs, rental, resell services around them, but also how they were requesting brands to support them in doing that. But earlier I found a question as well, which I think is very interesting, about the challenges of innovation, is how the market is ready and mature to adopt that. And that's actually something that is quite a barrier for innovation to go mainstream and go from a niche to be widely adopted. So it's a collective effort, but it's still quite challenging for consumers to be able to match their intentions with their action in this field. And that said, it's the other tricky part is, as much as they have good intentions, if it's not easy to access, if it's not extremely user friendly, then it adds barriers to the adoption.
Thank you, Hasna. I found another question here, but just before, I want to share a very sweet comment that I found here on the chat from Brona Power. Well, maybe I said it wrongly, sorry, but that was saying that really love emphasizing the story behind the clothes. I love to hear the story myself. So I completely agree with this. And thanks to Lena, Hasna, and Soumya for sharing a little bit of your personal stories. And here we have another question, that is, what do the speakers think about the rising trends of green claims in the fashion industry, especially those referring to use of recycled materials as input? Considering that the current market of fiber-to-fiber recycling is still very small, shouldn't consumer information rather focus on the other aspects with more impact? So I'll give the floor to Lynn if you want to give your first opinion, Lynn, and then you can pass through another panelist. Please.
Thank you. Sorry, can you repeat the question again? Sorry, I was looking at a different question.
Yes, sure. So what do you think about rising trends of green claims in the fashion industry, especially those referring to use of recycled materials as input? Considering that the current market of fiber-to-fiber recycling is still very small, shouldn't consumer information rather focus on other aspects with more impact?
I think we need consumer information on all of the changing landscape of the clothing industry, but we need to help consumers. I think Ruth has given us a fantastic overview of transparency and how we need transparency in the supply chain, and she's really unpacked it for us. And what we really need to do is then, how do we translate this information to consumers? How do they get it easily? How do they understand what these changes mean? How do we help? Do we overhaul the whole labeling system? Our labeling system in consumer clothing is so antiquated, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't tell the consumer anything in a really simple guiding way that can help us to make sustainable choices, and to help us to, we have QR codes now, we have ways of accessing information, but how does that work with a really busy household, with a really busy family, the parents involved in the choosing of children's clothes or choosing on the family wardrobe. How do we make it really easy and accessible for all consumers to access this information and make sustainable, ethical choices? And I think that's we need a lot more research in that field. Thank you. And thanks for the question. Really great question.
Yes. Maybe Ruth, do you want to add something as you really spoke about it?
Sorry, my presentation was quite long. I hadn't realized the time, but yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of findings about transparency that we're only just scratching the surface. I think for me, the idea of making labeling better, more information on websites is great, but ultimately, I don't think it should be the consumer's obligation to be an expert in detecting truth from lies. And ultimately, we need to have legislation that ensures that there are no false sustainability claims, there is no greenwashing. We shouldn't have to decide between a sustainable item and a not sustainable item, because that not sustainable item should not be on the market. We should legislate out that not sustainable item. If something is made with forced labor, with modern slavery, with fossil fuels, why is it on the market in the first place? So while we transition to that point, we need consumers to be empowered. But ultimately, what I want to see is legislators being tougher on the fashion industry rather than leaving it to consumers who, as you say, Lynn, like are busy, they have kids, they have jobs. Most people don't have time to research for an hour before they click buy on a website. I definitely don't. And I think, you know, legislators have a lot to answer for that corporate accountability, which we see in plenty of other industries. You wouldn't be able to buy a car that wasn't safe and fit for purpose. But we see fashion as like the Wild West, basically, of getting away with social and environmental damage. So yeah, I think it's a hard it's a hard question to answer when I really think it shouldn't be on consumers at all.
If I can just come back there though, I mean, but consumers for so long have had no information apart from this tiny label. And so whilst we need that legislation, what do? I mean, we as consumers, we need some form of information. We need washing instructions, longevity, things that keep our garments in use for longer. As consumers, I think you're absolutely right, Ruth. Legislation should be taking care of the ethics and the sustainability and the industry. But from the longevity of clothing, it's how do we help consumers to do that? How do we make sure that they know what's in their hands? And at this present time, consumers really don't know what they're wearing unless we're in this field. A lot of consumers don't know the difference between a natural fiber and a synthetic fiber. Therefore, how can you know how to look after that fiber? How can you know how to look after that garment? And so beyond these really important legislative issues, we really need to support consumers. Sorry.
Yeah, I almost think that is less about the consumption itself and more about the use, right? So we have so much focus on, should I buy from this brand or should I buy from this brand? When really that culture change, which I think is in the UNEP strategy, is such an important thing to teach people to repair, to care properly. That is all about what's already in your wardrobe, not necessarily buying anything new.
And sorry, if I can jump in, I was also wondering about the question asking sort of, you know, the information about, for instance, recycled fiber input. And I think we should stress that the communication and the information to consumers should be about whatever is relevant. And relevant, if we look back at the Consumer Information Program guidelines, it's really about what does create the biggest impact for that product and how do we decrease. And It's true that, of course, we should move away from virgin fibers as much as possible, but it's not only about replacing one material with another. So it's not the solution to say, okay, we're going to have only recycled fibers, but we're going to keep on pushing as many products with these fibers out to the market as possible. But again, and yeah, as Ruth said, how do we then care for those? How do we keep them longer? So that's what I would say about that question also, that the communication shouldn't only be about one aspect, but it should really be about the entirety.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And following what you have just brought, Bettina, there's another question that maybe you all can follow up. It's from Francesca. So, how is the fashion industry really moving to clearly define and communicate the most sustainable choices for consumers, avoiding greenwashing? So now, how can we see they are moving? What are they really doing? How can we see this, and how can they be really avoiding greenwashing nowadays? Any one of you, if you wanna just come in.
Ruth, would you like to start sort of?
Sure, I can start or give someone else a chance to speak. I'm really interested to hear from Hasna how.
Yeah, I was about to jump in actually.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I think greenwashing has long days ahead of them because of the growth, the marketing, how the brand equity is so central for brands. So how it's important for them to be perceived as a hero, as a positive persona for their consumer. So I think even if they have the most genuine intention to be more sustainable or circular, they will by nature be over exaggerating, over yeah, everything will be pink and nice and and extra just to make sure that their brand equity is as high as it is, and at the end of the day justifying any price point. So the biggest greenwashing, most flagrant one is the Boohoo X Kim. Kourtney Kardashian that was just released earlier this week or last week. This is one of their biggest greenwashing campaign, and the issue is that Boohoo and Pretty Little Things are targeting a young audience that is like absorbing all these information, absorbing this marketing material, and also wants to relate to this Kardashian kind of clan. The other aspect, to come back to Lynn's point about the QR code. So a lot of brands have adopted QR codes in their products, and they want to engage with their consumers. They want to extend the conversation with them when they are home and they are not in store anymore. But while they talk about helping them, supporting them in taking care of their clothes, when you scan that QR code, it's just about storytelling. It's just about marketing material again. It's nothing really actionable, and it stops the conversation actually to what the brand wants to communicate to their consumer and customers, and less of a dialogue between the two, where I think it's one of the first steps for brands that wants to commit to circularity. It's the one step that they need. Listen to their customers, listen to them, and support them in doing more circular, adopting more circular initiatives. That said, there are other brands I can't mention exactly, but I will be able to from next week supporting some of their customers with repairs, and we are very happy to help them in that strategy and offering the repair and alteration for them. And I think it's we won't be communicating about it per se, but I think it's one step towards removing greenwashing through real action.
Thanks. Sorry, can I just jump in here, because I've just remembered that Sumya, we were cut short on your presentation, and it would be really great to hear your perspective on the questions.
Yeah, so I think my particular take for this phenomenon of greenwashing is that every brand, when they're coming up with a solution, they want one size fits all solution, like something that might work in India might not work in Europe, and they always try to find, like, I want a magic pill which will change everything. So it did take like lot of years for them to come where they have come, and like it is going to take some time to evolve. The most important factor is, like, are they like really serious about their like, I would more focus on the seriousness aspect of it, than like if it has actually turned into something really big, which is like going to, like, this kind of expectation that everything is going to change overnight is a bit frustrating to begin with. And then the other point being, like, unless there are like ground startups which show that this kind of model might work, like ours, they won't be able to take like a big leap and see that, what is it that is going to bring some issues. So for example, like, if there is a very big company that in India would like to see something related to denim, so it's better that we give in our insights, like, what should work and what should not work. And this is happening on ground. Like, there are many brands that approach us, like, to understand what are the issues, what are the challenges. So this is helpful. Like, something has to come from down, so as to make it robust, and something has to come from up, saying that, we really are serious about these things. Unless there is a bridge that we are going to gap, this is going to happen again and again, because the marketing team is into something, and the production guys are into something. They are not all on same page. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Soumya. And trying to bring Lena as well to this conversation. There are some questions here on the chat addressing the company's challenges, not only communicating, but even in their production, in their chain. And I want to take the opportunity to share with you one of the results of our pool, and then I put together the question to Lena. So one of our questions on the pool was, as businesses, what is the biggest challenge to innovating towards a circular economy in fashion? And we had 44% answering needs of investment. And after that, we have 33% answering access to technologies. So I would like to hear about you, Lena. What do you think are the biggest challenges to innovating towards a more circular economy in fashion, please?
Well, I think it's cultural, very cultural. I mean, in here in my country, in the small city I am, because for circular fashion, or we just think that if you reuse just a piece of cloth, we're just having, I mean, no class. We just are not a good looking. So we just said, okay, we're going to get into a story, and that piece going to start a story with you. So that's the communication we start doing with our consumers. And also we bring our consumers to our suppliers, so it start a circular moving, like our consumers just buy the other clothes from our suppliers. So that's as a good movement we just make to the clothes. And then also it's just tell them that if you just connect with the clothes, you just start and connect with your body, you start making a very good challenge to your day. You just start irradiation, or just showing empowered woman. So that's the circulation we just set to our consumers.
Thank you very much. I will invite Soumya and Hasna if you want also to share your point of view as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure. I can go and also talk about our investment journey. Yeah, at the beginning of Save Your Wardrobe, when we started back in 2017, talking about sustainability or circularity was like talking alien to people. It wasn't really a conversation that people were thinking about or even engaging in, and we were actively advised to discard that. So what we had to do to survive was to focus on our financial and keep our business model. It felt like we were plotting to save the planet. So but then from 2019, and also catalyzed by the COVID and the pandemic, people started realizing that we couldn't go further, and so in 2019 we started our first official round of investment, talking to angel investors, but also onboarding one institutional investor, which is Farfetch, who is the first retailer who thought about circularity as part of their business model. And then just now, this year, 2021, we've closed our seed round, and it sounds easy now to raise several millions, but actually it's really difficult because we are at a very early stage of the discussion around circular business models, and people are very risk adverse. So investors are not willing to put their money where, and it's a very a cynic way to see how they consider investment in sustainability, as long as it doesn't, as long as it keeps the linear business model alive and afloat. That's when some investors will consider getting involved. So there's still a lot of things to do in this, and one of the biggest challenges for business models and innovations and startups. But yeah, I think there is the opportunity is really at the earliest of its stages. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you very much. Soumya, do you want to add something?
I'm sorry, my internet is cracking a bit. I think it won't be a good idea.
That's fine. Don't worry. Okay, so we are about to run. We are running off time. I just want to share with you our last poll. The last question was made really to inspire, or for us, everybody who is here today, to have something to reflect about after this session. So the question was, what is the key next step to turn information into action? And we had 42% saying that is really necessary to eradicate all messages encouraging overconsumption. And we had 32% answering empower the consumer as an agent of positive transformation. And we had 17% saying provide accessible and participative solutions. So we can see from these answers and from all the discussion that we had today that it's really providing sustainable information to consumer and creating a more transparent chain and communication. It's a huge challenge. So I want to thank UNEP, of course, and One Planet Network for the opportunity, for this space, to discussions like this, that it's really important for us to hear and share thoughts and insights. And from Akatu, I want to say that it was a huge and very amazing opportunity to organize and to be here. And I'm really glad we could have this amazing team of women sharing their experiences. So I thank you all again for accepting the invitation and to having the time, to making the time to be here with us. And of course, I thank everybody who could be here attending and participating and giving your opinion also in our pools. So finally, I would like to give the floor back to Lynn for your final words, Lynn. And of course, thank you very much for conducting this session for us. It was amazing to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruna. I think it just falls to me to really thank the audience for your participation over this 2-hour session. I think that the chat is really rich in a whole range of resources that I hope we can really capture and feed back to everyone who's attended. I'd just like to thank all of the speakers, Hasna, Somya, Lena, Ruth, and Bettina, for your really insightful presentations that are really useful. And I think we all have a lot to think about when we come back to our desks on Monday morning. There's an awful lot of work has gone on behind the scenes to make this session possible, and I think it can't be underestimated the support that Akatu and UNEP and the Consumer International team have given to make this such a successful international session. So thank you very much, and we're finishing right on time, and I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody who's here. Have a wonderful weekend, and keep thinking about how we can solve this clothing challenge. Thank you very much. Goodbye.